Welcome back to another FPL video. This will be the team selection for Gameweek 23. I'll briefly discuss how I did in Gameweek 22. I've now got 2 free transfers for the upcoming deadline. Be sure to tune in for the deadline stream on Saturday. And let's get this video to the 200 likes. Subscribe to the channel as we're looking to push on towards 23k subscribers and beyond. And there's also links to my Twitter, Instagram. I'd encourage you to follow me on those platforms and also join the Discord server where we have hundreds of members. We're looking to get to 1,000 this year. And not only that, there's the FPL League and also a link to Drafthound. Check all of them out in the description below. Without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. Both of my goalkeepers scored the same number of points. Areola and Dubravka produced 3. I started Areola based on the fixture, but I didn't expect a clean sheet for either team, and it ended up being a 1-1 draw for West Ham, whilst Newcastle won 3-1 away from home against Aston Villa, and they conceded quite late on in that game. So thankfully Aston Villa scored through Ollie Watkins, and as a result I wasn't regretting my goalkeeper decision too much. But in the weeks to come, based on the fixtures, I think I'm going to start seeing Dubravka a lot more often in my starting 11 compared to Areola. My defensive line was simply woeful this week, starting with Trent, who got 1 point off the bench, whilst his replacement Connor Bradley scored and assisted twice in a 4-1 win over Chelsea, and he got 21 points. If only that was Trent, it would have been game-changing for me this week, but it wasn't meant to be, and Trent's injury has been a major setback because he missed out entirely against Bournemouth when Liverpool kept a clean sheet, and Connor Bradley also got an attacking return in that game. So Trent really could have been on maybe 20, 30, possibly more points in the last 2 game weeks, but that injury did set him back, and he also was very disappointing in his last start against Newcastle. But now with Arsenal way up next, despite how well Connor Bradley is playing, it's going to be a huge game there for Liverpool, and winning there could pretty much eliminate Arsenal from a serious chance of winning the title, and that is a massive game. And I still think Trent gets back into the side, but it's no longer a guarantee. And if we look at future double game weeks, maybe in 25, if not later in the season, who's to say that Trent is going to start both games now? It could be Connor Bradley starting in the easier game because he's proven that he can deliver against anybody really, against Chelsea, one of the biggest teams in the league arguably, and also he's done it against Bournemouth, and he's been so good in the FA Cup as well. So Connor Bradley has shown a lot of potential, and now he can definitely take some minutes of Trent in the future. The second defender is Pedro Porro. It was a dog who scored against Brentford, but Spurs conceded 2 goals. They actually fell behind at the beginning of the game, but Pedro Porro is there for the attacking potential. In terms of clean sheets, they're going to be few and far between for Tottenham, even with most of their key defenders back from injury, and they're just not really a side they're going to keep many clean sheets unless something drastically changes. So Pedro Porro is still in here. He blanks in Gameweek 26, but he does have a confirmed fixture in blank Gameweek 29 against Fulham. My final defender is Estupinian, and Brighton were 2-0 down inside 3 minutes against Luton Town. Estupinian was subbed off around half-time, and Brighton ended up losing 4-0. It was a massive shock to all of us. I actually thought Brighton would drop points, but I thought 2-2 was my prediction, and in the end it ended up being a 4-0 thrashing by Luton Town. And I still like Estupinian in the long term, but it has to be said, Brighton aren't good defensively. You can't rely on them in the long term, and a bit like Pedro Porro, with Estupinian you're relying on assists. It's the occasional goal in this case with Estupinian and some bonus points. It has been a while, but Saka finally delivered a double-digit haul, and that's now 2 successive away games where he has scored against Fulham and Nottingham Forest. He only scored once, but he got maximum bonus points in the last game, and Saka is still a consistent option overall, despite the last 7-8 game weeks being quite poor, especially by his high standards. And in terms of points won for his club, Saka's only behind Salah and Son in the Premier League. He's been very important for Arsenal in terms of goals and assists. That's 10 goals and 13 assists across all competitions this season, despite the fact that his performances have been a little bit lower than what we've seen in the past, and people are saying he's having a poor season, which goes to show how good of a player he is and also how young he is. He's doing it at a consistent basis, so he deserves a lot of credit for that. But it's now Liverpool up next, and the next few fixtures aren't particularly great there for Arsenal. The next midfielder is Jarrod Bowen, a bit similar actually. The next 2 games are against Man United away and Arsenal at home. Not that great, but Bowen returned in both games last month, or back in December now. The thing is with Bowen though, he is actually expendable at this moment in time. He's blanked in 3 games in a row, and despite Kudus returning from AFCON and starting, winning the penalty which Ward-Prowse converted against Bournemouth, I'm still not too happy with Bowen at this moment in time, and I think the absence of Paqueta is massive. So Bowen is kind of edging on towards sell territory right now. It's between hold and sell. Let me know what you think down the comment section below. But I'm quite open to sell Bowen in the next couple of weeks, and Richarlison and Jota are two prime candidates to replace him, especially Jota if Liverpool double in double Gameweek 25. The problem is, if we don't get confirmation today, on the Friday the 2nd of February, it's very unlikely to happen. So we really need confirmation today of Liverpool doubling in Gameweek 25 against Luton Town, and of course Luton Town would also double. So let's watch this space. I'll keep you up to date through my live streams and videos. My third midfielder is Phil Foden, and he got an assist in the end for the third goal which Rodri scored, but still quite an underwhelming performance, and the fact they played on the right isn't really encouraging from an FPL perspective. I still think he'll start most games for Man City. He's been very nailed on and having a very good season in the Premier League and across all competitions, but in terms of goal contributions and being in threatening positions, I think Foden is at his best FPL-wise through the middle, and we're not going to see that with De Bruyne now back, Alvarez potentially dropping down to an attacking midfield role, and Haaland returning to the starting 11. So Foden might not be as appealing of an FPL option as he once was a couple of weeks or months ago, but I still think he's decent enough to hold for double Gameweek 25. Now the fourth midfielder is Cole Palmer. Despite blanking in Gameweek 26 and also being quite ineffective against Liverpool, I still think he's worth holding on to for the next 2 game weeks at least. And around his price in the midfield, you only have Gordon who really competes with him, and maybe Pedro Neto and a few other options here and there, Douglas Luiz, but I think Palmer is still the best option at 6.5 million and below in the midfield position. You could argue Eze and Analyse could be nice alternatives, and I would consider them based on the fixtures and also the fact that Crystal Palace feature in blank Gameweek 26 whilst Chelsea don't, and let's wait and see what happens in the FA Cup, which directly impacts blank Gameweek 29. So if Chelsea beat Aston Villa in the 4th round replay, then Chelsea will blank against Arsenal in Gameweek 29, but if you really look at it, Aston Villa are the favourites to progress now, with the replay taking place at Villa Park. Now the final midfielder is Pascal Gross, probably one of the worst decisions I've made in recent weeks, but it wasn't such a simple decision with the likes of Richarlison and Jota blanking in Gameweek 26, and also by buying Gross, I was able to afford Haaland in for Archer whilst keeping Solanke and Watkins. If I bought in Jota, Richarlison, or even other midfielders who are more expensive than Gross, I wouldn't have been able to do so, and that's one positive about him. But the FPL points are the most important. I also bought him for the fixtures, which are amazing on paper up until Gameweek 29, but the issue here is that Gross simply isn't delivering, and he's playing far too deep to make a real impact in the game in terms of goals and assists. The fixtures are still there. I think he will return quite well over the next 4 or 5 game weeks, but I think Jota, Richarlison and the others will outperform him quite significantly, even though they blank in Gameweek 26. So Gross is on the chopping block. The same goes for Bowen. Even Saka isn't entirely safe. So there'll be some key changes in the midfield for Gameweek 23. But before we move on to that, let's now complete this performance analysis with the forwards. On a more positive note, my 2 forwards performed adequately this week, with Watkins scoring and getting 1 bonus point against Newcastle despite losing 3-1 at home, and Watkins also had a second goal disallowed for offside shortly afterwards, but I was actually considering switching the captaincy to Watkins. I would have gained 1 point from that decision, as you'll see very soon. I didn't do it, but really it's just 1 point. I've actually had much worse captaincy calls in the last couple of weeks, let alone throughout the entire season. And my final player was Solanke, who scored, got a couple of bonus points against West Ham. He opened the scoring through that Calvin Phillips error, and Solanke's been so consistent this season. He's actually got the most non-penalty goals of any player in the Premier League with 12, and he's got 13 throughout the entire campaign with 1 assist. He's been so impressive. I covered him in the Trans Tips video, and I talked about holding him, and this was obviously recorded before the West Ham versus Bournemouth game. But let's now move on to the captaincy, talk about my rank and points, which isn't particularly great, and you'll probably tell by my performance on screen. But let's talk about that, and then we'll move on to the team selection, where things will surely improve. I ended up captaining Foden, and maybe a little bit of a regret there. I wasn't that confident about him returning, and the same goes for most of the other players. And Saka actually did cross my mind, but with his lack of form, it was difficult for me to justify that. And Arsenal have struggled at Nottingham Forest in recent seasons at the Forest ground, but I got 47 points overall, and my overall points is okay, but the rank is dropping and dropping. I was around 500,000 last week and around 300k just 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I keep on dropping at the moment. things need to change. My team doesn't look that bad on paper, but with Trent missing out the last couple of games with injury and also Pascal Gross being an awful signing, I think those are two major contributing factors towards my demise in recent weeks. And I also haven't gotten the captaincy right, which is another major reason why. And look, the captaincy wasn't too bad in the end. I got a return from Foden, Watkins as my vice. It wasn't actually a bad kind of thought process there, but in the end, I need to improve the captaincy. I also need to improve my midfield and also buy back Erling Haaland in the next couple of weeks. And all of that will be addressed in the next section. And later on, I'll be using Drafthound and fpl.team to discuss other major points about Gameweek 23. But let's now move on to the team selection portion for the upcoming deadline. As I mentioned towards the beginning of this video, I'm looking to start Dubravka over Areola in the next couple of weeks, and with Luton Town at home, it makes sense whilst Areola faces Man United away and West Ham have a particularly poor record at Old Trafford, and whilst Luton Town are in great form, they just scored 4 past Brighton, I still think Newcastle at home are capable of a clean sheet here. And not to mention that Newcastle looked very impressive against Aston Villa in their last outing in Gameweek 22. So Dubravka starts. I'm not going to have any goalkeeper benching dilemmas. I think most of them will come in the midfield and forward line. Despite the awful output by my defenders in Gameweek 22, I'm starting the exact same three with Trent Alexander-Arnold away to Arsenal, and it's between him and Saliba. And because of Trent's attacking potential and bonus points, I'm going to go for Trent over Saliba all day long. And Liverpool are also the more informed team, especially since Christmas Day. And I think Trent has to be in here, despite the fact that Conor Bradley could usurp him and start once again on Sunday against the Gunners. My second defender is Pedro Porro away to Everton. I'm not expecting a clean sheet, so really I'm hoping or relying for attacking potential through assists mainly. He hasn't scored a goal in the Premier League so far this season, but let's wait and see if that changes anytime soon. And my final defender is Pervis Estupiñán, who ironically could have the best chance of keeping a clean sheet amongst my entire backline, particularly amongst the 3 defenders facing Crystal Palace at home, who just scored 3 goals past Sheffield United, and Analyse and Eze should be available. Of course, they picked up Knox and were substituted due to their injuries in Gameweek 22, but Eze himself said that he's fine, and so is Analyse, and I think both of them will be available and start against Brighton. If that's the case, then the chances of a clean sheet will definitely dip, because those 2 players have that X factor and they have that spark to make something happen, and Brighton aren't the most solid defensively. So let's wait and see what happens, but my defensive line is probably the weakest part of my team in Gameweek 23. The midfield is where things get very interesting. I'm currently starting Saka at home to Liverpool. He's done well against them in the past, particularly at the Emirates, like the 3-2 victory last season. He got a double-digit haul, but things are very different now, with Liverpool now being where Arsenal were last season, the most informed team in the league, and also leading the league table, of course. But Saka is capable of a return against Liverpool, even if it's quite a low one, 5 to 6 points, maybe 7-8. That would still be enough. I'd be very happy with it, but that is not a guarantee against Liverpool, and I do have a clash between Trent and Saka right now with these provisional transfers. Now, the next midfielder is Palmer at home to Wolves. I think he's a good captaincy option despite his blank in Gameweek 22. He's been very consistent over the course of the season, and Wolves were involved in a 7-goal thriller against Man United. They equalised in the 94th minute and then conceded 1 or 2 minutes later through an amazing Mainu bit of play. But Wolves are a bit suspect defensively from time to time, and Chelsea could still score 2 or 3 past them, and if they do, Palmer is very likely to be involved. Now, next up is Phil Foden away to Brentford. I'm not particularly happy with him. Since I bought him in, he's blanked, and he also was quite ineffective and got 6 points against Burnley. So I'm not the biggest fan of Foden in FPL, but he has been very good for me in UCL fantasy. And if he plays on the right-hand side, which is very likely, that's not going to be great. And there's the odd possibility that Foden is benched from time to time. And really what I want to see is him playing down the middle. The same goes for Pascal Gross as an attacking midfielder, but I doubt we're going to see that for both of them. And that's why I'm looking to make a midfielder transfer and rebuy Anthony Gordon, who I had earlier in the season. He did very well for me, producing double-digit hauls at home against Chelsea and Man United in successive games. And now it's Luton Town at home, and he's only blanked once this season at St James's Park in the league. So I'm very happy to have Gordon. He's also a nice 7th or 8th midfielder. He's very good in terms of rotation if you're going to have these benching headaches in the future. You would mainly bench him in away matches, and whenever he's at St James's Park, you start him, even in the more difficult games against Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, or anybody else in the league. I'm going for 3 forwards for the first time in a very long while, starting with Solanke at home to Nottingham Forest. I bought him in when he faced Nottingham Forest away from home a couple of weeks ago, and he scored a hat-trick and got 17 points. So he is a captaincy contender in Game Week 23, and he also scored in Game Week 22 against West Ham. And despite blanking in the previous 2 games before that, his consistency overall is very impressive, with 6 goals in his last 6 Premier League games. The next forward is Erling Haaland. It all depends, though, in terms of whether he's going to start or not. If we get any information before the deadline, then I will act upon that information. If it still looks like he's going to be benched, then I could hold off this transfer for yet another week and instead focus on the midfield and make 2 transfers there and buy in the likes of Jota. That is actually a possibility I'm considering. But if Haaland is projected to start, and I'm expecting him to at the moment, then I will buy him and start him and have 1 key midfielder on the bench. The final forward is Watkins away to Sheffield United. Once again, a nice captaincy contender. He blanked in the reverse fixture, but I think away from home, this fixture could suit him a little bit more than the one at Villa Park did just a month or so ago. That's a very good front three in my opinion, probably the best you can assemble. Maybe Ivan Toney will have something to say about that. And Jurgen Klopp actually said today that Darwin Núñez is a doubt to face Arsenal, and he did wear a boot after the game. So let's wait and see what happens there. But that only adds to Jota being nailed on for Game Week 23 and potentially the next couple of weeks while Salah is still out. Let's see if Salah maybe makes a miraculous return at the weekend, but very likely it's going to be Jota, Diaz and maybe Gakpo against Arsenal if Darwin Núñez does miss out or he's not fit enough to start that game. But I'm really looking at these 3 forwards. I know Alvarez was very impressive in Game Week 22, but I think Toney is the next best option after Solanke, Haaland and Watkins. Let's now talk about the captaincy, my substitutions, and then we'll move on to the other websites like Drafthound and fpl.team to optimize my squad even further. As things stand, I'm going for Areola, Bowen, Saliba and Lascelles on my bench. It looks quite strong on paper, but Lascelles is still a doubt in terms of his injury, and with Schär and Botman back, Lascelles isn't going to start games anytime soon, not to mention Saliba faces Liverpool at home and Bowen faces Man United away, but it's very difficult to bench a player of that quality and consistency, yet Bowen has blanked in the last 3 Premier League games and doesn't look the same without Lucas Paqueta in the starting 11. He's still out due to injury, but he could be back fairly soon. And with Jarrod Bowen as well, it's between him and Saka for a starting spot in my 11, and it all depends on any Haaland news we get before the deadline or any league lineups or reliable sources with their predicted lineups. If Haaland isn't expected to start against Brentford on Monday, then I might hold off this transfer for a little while longer, possibly until Game Week 24 or 25, and instead I'll have a 3-5-2 formation with Archer on the bench, and it would be potentially Jota coming into my starting 11 for either Bowen or Saka, and that's how I'd use my 2 free transfers. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I'd highly encourage you to give feedback in terms of your suggestions for my squad, but it would be Gross out for Gordon as things stand, and also Haaland in for Cameron Archer. And also in terms of the captaincy, the last thing to decide, it would be Haaland if he's expected to start, of course, and Palmer's my current vice, but I'm also considering Gordon, Watkins and Solanke for the captaincy. It's a very open-ended discussion with the armband this week. I'm currently favouring Haaland with Palmer as my vice, but I have to say Solanke and Gordon are very tempting for me, and you can't forget Watkins due to a sheer consistency, and he's also capable of some big returns, 8-9 points or above in away matches. Let's now move on to the other websites. As I discussed earlier, there's a link to Drafthound in the description below. I'm going to show you all the tools at your disposal, so be sure to use my link and you can gain access to all these tools for as little as £2 per week. Man City players dominate the player rankings, mainly due to double game at 25, but Alvarez, Haaland, Foden, De Bruyne and Ivan Toney make up the top 5 for projected points over the next 3 game weeks, and there are so many other metrics you can analyse, such as chance of scoring for a specific game week, and Haaland is top with 62% in game week 23. Alvarez, Watkins, Gordon and Solanke make up the top 5 in this instance. There are so many different metrics, so be sure to check out Drafthound. There's also this optimization tool, and it's recommending Palmer as my vice captain, which I'm currently doing, and also to start Saliba over Trent, which is an interesting one, but I think that's mainly based on Trent's lack of output recently and his injury situation. Connor Bradley might even start at the weekend, so let's wait and see. But these are all updated daily, and the same goes for the fixture analysis, where now Liverpool have dropped to third with Arsenal and Man City in the top two, and of course blank Gameweek 26 does play a part, but Liverpool could still yet double in Gameweek 25, so I'll keep an eye out for updates and keep you covered on this channel through my live streams and videos. There's also the player comparison tool. It'll show you the popular choices such as Alvarez versus Haaland right now, who's in good form. You've also got De Bruyne versus Saka. A lot of you might be thinking of switching Saka to De Bruyne ahead of double Gameweek 25, and there are all these popular comparisons, but you can most importantly create your own very easily. And there's also the predicted lineups, and you'll see the expected minutes for each player if you sign up to Drafthound as a pro paid-tier member using my link. And there's a new feature called player scouting, which was added just a couple of days ago. And what they also have, one of the key features of this section, is projected points over the next 5. That's something new. Normally Drafthound shows you the expected points for the next week or the next 3 overall, but now they're doing it for the next 5. And as you can see, Man City players once again dominate the proceedings, and even Ivan Toney is right up there due to that double Gameweek 25 set of fixtures against Man City and Liverpool. And you've also got Saka right up there, Anthony Gordon, who's going to be a very popular transfer this week. I'm looking to buy him in myself. So let me know your thoughts on Drafthound in the comment section down below. And let's now move on to fpl.team, a free resource where you can visualize your teams in future game weeks. With my provisional transfers for Gameweek 23, this is how I'd line up in Gameweek 24 with the Brathwaite in goal, a back three of Pedro Porro, Saliba and Trent Alexander-Arnold, a midfield four of Foden, Bowen, Saka and Palmer, and a front three of Haaland, Watkins and Solanke. And currently Haaland will be my captain and Trent my vice. If I were to bring in Jota though, he would certainly be a captaincy contender, and at the very least he'd take the vice captaincy, and my bench would be Areola, Gordon, Estupinian and Lascelles. And this is what I mean about Gordon. In away matches you could bench him, but Forest is quite a good fixture actually, so maybe I'd reconsider this and start him potentially with a Bowen or Saka, but that all depends on my transfers in Gameweek 23. And Erling Haaland isn't locked in because, like I said, I want to see if he's got a good chance of starting at the weekend. I personally think he will against Brentford, but that could certainly change by the deadline, so be sure to tune in tomorrow and smash the like button of this video. Subscribe if you're new. Let's try to get this video to the 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 23k subscribers and beyond. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon, Championships Discord server, the FPL League and Drafthound, which I showed you just a couple of moments ago. I wish you all the best of luck for Gameweek 23 and the rest of the campaign, and I'll see you next time.